as a part of this series, it is my incredible pleasure to introduce Rosie Ward, who will be talking with Mark Hamilton, the CEO of Harcos, as they explore the Harcos story and how living their why has built a foundation for resiliency. For those who aren't too familiar with Harcos, they're based in Kansas City, Kansas, with 27 facilities in 19 states and a team of over 500 people. And Harcos has been on a journey to inspire a culture that gives every employee an invitation to show up as an owner. Harcos has been working closely with Rosie Ward of Salveo Partners for 3 years, identifying and bringing to life the culture initiatives that have cascaded with much success through the 100-plus-year-old company. Now, Mark, as CEO of Harcos, is a believer in servant leadership. With over 30 years of experience in operations leadership, he's learned that success is only sustainable by nurturing and empowering the people that work alongside you. And as the foundation to his leadership style, he strives to always take responsibility for his actions and wants to follow employees to feel safe to do the same. And Rosie Ward is a fierce advocate for humanity who is sought after to help rehumanize workplaces. She actually has recently written and published a book called Rehumanizing the Workplace that I hope that she shares a little bit about, and shares the Harcos story in it as well, that free, fuel, and inspire people to bring their best selves to work and at home every day. Mark and Rosie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with the Conscious Capitalism community.
Thanks for having us.
Just to correct on a pronunciation, sorry, but it's like Harcos, even though it looks like it should be Harcos because there's only one S.
Thank you for correcting me.
That's okay. A lot of people do the same thing. When you see only one S, you tend to go to the long O instead of the short O. So, but anyway, we've been around for a long time. In fact, I was thinking about this morning, that being that the company was founded basically under a different name, but is still the roots of the company in 1917. This is technically the second pandemic that this company has gone through since the Spanish flu was in 1918. So can't comment on how we did during that one, but yeah, these are interesting times. But as you said, we do operate in 19 states. We have 27 facilities. We're a little bit unique. We're mid-sized company compared to other large distributors in the chemicals industry, but we also are a manufacturer. So we're both a manufacturer and a distribution company. So two of those facilities are basically manufacturing sites. And we manufacture chemicals that are used in making soaps, cleaners, been very important during this time, making a lot of things that have been very necessary. So we are an essential business that's continued to operate throughout this pandemic. Much of our workforce having to come in to operate the facilities, both from manufacturing plant workers, chemical workers, and we have our own fleet of trucks. So we have truck drivers that have been out there throughout this whole experience. So anyway, we're a full line supplier that services a multitude of different industries, but some of the primary ones are agriculture, like I said, household and industrial and institutional cleaning, just to name a couple. Water treatment's another big segment as well. Very, very vital things to keep things going at any time. In 2001, the management of the company went private, and that was led by Kevin Murner, my predecessor, who was the CEO up until the first of this year. And he and a small minority group of owners kept it private, 2001 up and through 2013, and then in 2013, we basically became a fully 100% owned, employee-owned company, an ESOP, as it's known. So, and that's how we've operated now over the last 5 to 6 years as an ESOP. And that was an interesting story in and of itself that maybe we can go into as we go into the Q&A.
Well, and Mark, can you say a little bit, because I think one of the unique things that struck me when I first was connected with Harcos was the uniqueness of your ESOP, because there are a lot of ESOPs out there, but the way Kevin decided to set it up, I think really is truly unique and also tees up your story.
Yeah, it certainly does. And it certainly shows and I think fits the idea of being conscious capitalists. You know, Kevin, when he went forward with the conversion to an ESOP, and he was basically representing the ownership group selling the company to the employees. In most ESOPs, when they're formed, there's a hierarchy of people and how many shares you get. So the higher up you are in the company, you get more shares. The ownership is then, in that hierarchy. He insisted that everybody get an equal amount of shares. Some of the investment people assisting us on it said, what do you mean? You can't do that. And he said, what do you mean? Is it not legal? And they said, no, because nobody does that. And quite frankly, he said, well, that's what we want to do. We want people to feel that they're equal owners in this company, so they can think and act like an owner. So I think that does set a good foundation for, how we've been trying to move forward and try to improve on that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Now, we actually already have our first question. If anyone has questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A below. But for those who are unfamiliar, can you just explain the basic concept of an ESOP?
Yeah. If you want to find out more, there's really a great website, because I'm not by any means an expert on this, but there's the National Center for Employee Ownership, nceo.org, that really does a great job, a much better job than I could do, of explaining what an ESOP is. But in essence, what it is that you issue shares of the company. Usually, and there are various ways you can get there. The format we used was that basically the company took out a loan to buy the company from Kevin, and issue shares to the company. When I say the company, the board of directors, serving as the fiduciary to issue the shares to the employees. And then there are all sorts of rules that come in at that point, from the ERISA rules of the Department of Labor that guide you on how you operate in an ESOP.
Great. So thank you for that background, Mark. And so I'm going to give a little history of kind of how we got involved with Harcos that brought up to Mark becoming the CEO. So Kevin Murner was his predecessor, and basically about a little over 3 years ago, it was 2017, so I guess we're going on our 4th year. I call them the dynamic duo of Dana and Judy in Harcos's HR department, reached out to me, and the initial request was, hey, can you come and speak to our wellness champions? We're just feeling like we need a little boost. And what any good consultant does, I just started asking questions. Okay, well, sure, but what is it you're wanting to accomplish? And why do you think they need a boost? And what's going on? And as I just started talking to them and listening to them, I learned about the ESOP, and I said, wait, hold on, you did what? And that the employees don't really understand what it means. And my experience is that when there are issues with wellness or well-being, it's usually not because of that. It's like there's culture or leadership things that need to be tended to. And so I just started asking questions of what have you done for leadership development, and tell me about your culture. And as we just started having a really great conversation, realized that there's such a good heart in the company. Like the Harcos was doing wellness for and with employees. They weren't doing what we call wellness or else to them. Just really good hearted, wanting to do the right things by people, but just kind of a little stuck. And so it started out with shifting this group of wellness champions to culture ambassadors, and didn't even really know what it meant, but found a group of people throughout the company representing all the different branches and locations, everything from truck drivers to customer service reps, to come together, a group of 40, and really look at, okay, what does it mean to really be intentional about culture? So I would say this is when their conscious culture journey started. And so we brought these group of 40 ambassadors together, and then it started being a quarterly thing. And initially it was just trying to educate them on what does it mean to be an equal owner of the company. Because no one had really done that, right? It became an ESOP, but there wasn't a lot of education. And so we started equipping the ambassadors with conscious leadership tools, how to be more self-aware, how to have conversations with your fellow employee owners about what this means, how to be a conduit for positive change. And so we started out really with them. And then as we've met with them every single quarter now since 2017, it's just been constantly building community and equipping them with tools to first and foremost be a conduit of positive change within Harcos, and then to really be the voice of their fellow employee owners and bring stuff forward. And so at all those meetings, Kevin and now Mark attends and does Q&A. And it's really, they're kind of that hub, right? With such a spread out, dispersed community. And then from that, we ended up creating an ambassador guide. So any new ambassadors get onboarded, they have the same language, the same tools, et cetera. So it started with the ambassador group. And then a year in, it was, well, how can we be more intentional about actually developing Harcos leaders? Because of the 110 leaders that were there, people leaders, they hadn't really been officially developed to be a leader. And so we were looking at that. And at the same time, we were looking at purpose. So we were kind of really taking on 3 of the conscious capitalism pillars at one time. And I remember we had initially said, well, why don't we take this group of ambassadors and bring them through a day-long workshop to find their why. Simon Sinek's work, those types of things, to really clarify the purpose. And Kevin Murner, the CEO at the time, came back and said, whoa, 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 no, if everybody's an equal owner, everybody should participate. So just taking that magnitude for a second of how do you get 540 people dispersed throughout the country into the process of finding their why. So we did. And so luckily I have a fabulous consultant that worked with me and has been my partner with Harcos, Scott Life. And he was on this journey with me because there's no way I could do this by myself. And we wanted the yin yang of male, female, just given the makeup of Harcos population. And we did 16 workshops over, I think, the course of 4 months in like 6 different cities, and got all 545 employee owners through a workshop, not just to help them tell stories and really elicit what their why is, but then what are their hows? What are those core behavioral anchors that really define them when they're at their best? And then we built in some of the education we had done with ambassadors and started to do with leaders about self-awareness and giving them a common language of how to show up, and really just trying to equip them of what does it mean to move from being, quote, just an employee to actually showing up as a leader or showing up as an owner. And then once the whys got finalized, then in 2019, we moved into living the why. And so again, there were all employee workshops, but it was really putting every single employee owner through, I'm going to say, foundational leadership development work, self-awareness, how to listen better, how to navigate conflict better, just all the critical things you need for people to work together, which is Harcos's why. And then from that, we actually created an owner's manual. So now there's a reference guide that reinforces the tools, and every new employee owner gets it. So we really started to build in deliberate practices to help them live that why. And all of those stories, we had like, what, 400 something. And since there's a book called The Heart of Harcos, and it's the stories of us at our best that kind of helps keep that alive. And they've been collecting stories since, and have even more since 2020. So, and then we did in-depth work with the leaders, right? So equipping them. And then last year, we also took the senior leadership team of 20 people and did really in-depth work with them and put them through immunity to change coaching, which helps overturn narrative that limits you and stuff. So it's really been this gradually building, but really trying to take this inside out approach that helps people be self-aware, give everybody a common language, give them tools they can refer back to, be able to be intentional about how they onboard new people into this culture, and try to keep it alive through this network of ambassadors who are regularly coming together. And now we're meeting more frequently this year and have split them up into little project groups. So if that gives you just an essence of kind of some of the foundational work. And then Mark took over. So Mark, what, you were there as COO with Kevin for a couple of years while we were doing this, but you officially took over as CEO.
I joined the company in 2016 in January. Yep. So I've been a part of the whole process that Rosie and Scott have done with us. So I've benefited from the whole evolution of the work that she's helped us do. But in 2018, I think it was June of 2018, Kevin met with me, and I actually came in to head up the manufacturing side of the business as a vice president. But he was wanting to step back and just kind of go on to the, stay on the board, but not be in a day-to-day CEO. But he wanted to do it in 2 steps. So to kind of bridge me, he created a position. We didn't have a COO. He appointed me as COO in June of 2018. And then in 2020, the plan was, or at the end of 2019, he stepped away completely, and I was named CEO on effective January 1st of 2020. So lucky me. And then, a couple of months later, a pandemic hits. No, it's been an interesting time. And just to share, I've known Harcos for a long time, and I've known Kevin for a long time. I was a principal player with one of Harcos's largest customers, and they continue to be one of our largest customers for 21 years. So I have a long history of knowing what Harcos is like from a customer point of view. And I regularly try to share those experiences to try to motivate people and give them a perspective of why why Harcos is a unique supplier when they're at their best, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So then that leads us into kind of the first question with that foundation, Mark, of with all of that work, right? I mean, a lot of intense work over a 3-year period that Harcos did and all employee owners engaged in, not without some bumps and bruises, obviously. But how do you think that that foundation has helped you stepping into CEO, this year, hitting a pandemic? Like, how is that helping you navigate these just crazy times?
Well, yeah. I think I've shared with you personally that I would hate to have faced this pandemic if it were, say, 2016 or 2017 as the CEO, because although Harcos was a good company at that time, had a lot of great qualities, we were struggling with, as Rosie indicated, of this conversion to an ESOP and embracing that, what that means. So having gone through roughly 3 years of intense work that Rosie was talking about, we had a lot of tools at our disposal, and our culture was in a much better place to be able to handle the adversity of a pandemic, of having half our workforce or more than half of our workforce convert to work from home, and then have those essential workers still having to come in every day, and how do we support them and keep them safe, and keeping everybody positive and connected. The work that we did gave us a great foundation to do that. Some of the language that we have. Rosie, maybe you could speak to it a little bit about being above the line and below the line, and recognizing that people don't show up at their best every day. But if you're a team, you try to help each other out. So it's I quickly realized that I had to communicate in a different way too. So I almost immediately in the month of March started doing some videos, really sort of ad hoc on my own, using my iPad or my laptop from home, trying to communicate to all the employees and sending out blasts. There were YouTube links to try to keep everybody motivated, connected, to give them an understanding of what was going on. Quickly found out that my dog, Otis, became the biggest star in that, because he would show up in the videos every now and then, and everybody wanted to hear Otis or see Otis. And a couple of videos I did during those weeks, he didn't appear, and I got some emails saying, "Where's Otis?" So,
Well, yeah, and if there's one thing I can say is, so, one of the things that Scott and I have been doing this year is reaching out before every other month, the ambassador meetings, reaching out individually to the ambassadors to see how they're doing, where they're struggling, what are they needing help with, because things are so different, and what have they appreciated. And we've overwhelmingly heard that Mark's videos, right, it helps them feel connected. And I think you even coined #HarcrossStrong, right, trying to rally people that we're strong, we're going to get through this, and really anchoring on the whys and hows. I mean, and so there's been that consistency of message, that consistency of we can still live our why via the discipline of how, and that people have really really embraced that and have really appreciated that in your leadership.
I think there was the CEO of Siemens, I believe, had sent out one of my people sent me a link to it. And I think he said it best, or at least I subscribed to what he was saying. He said there were two important things during this pandemic that he was finding he was basically centering on. And one was that since you have so many people working from home, and it's a much different environment than you were used to from a management standpoint, focus on the output of what people are doing and not the hours, because everybody has challenges working from home, different for some. Think about it when you have kids and things like that you're trying to manage. And then the second thing was to trust and empower your workers. Yes, hold everybody accountable. That's focusing on the output, right? But the idea that and he felt that they were being successful by focusing on those two basic things.
Yeah. Well, and I think that one of the things that I was also thinking about is that prior to the pandemic, the structure that we had shifted with your culture ambassadors was moving them into smaller subgroups of kind of 4 key areas that thought that they could help usher positive change. So process improvement and some communication recognition. And while there's been some struggles, just in terms of some people being, dispersed and some people being essential workers, and trying to do that work, what we've been realizing and seeing is, man, if you can get communication down well in the midst of chaos of a pandemic, if you can figure out best practices in chaos and a pandemic, think how much stronger you're going to be when things are not so hectic, when things are not so chaotic, right? And so people have kind of been doubling down on their efforts rather than, swirling. I just think it's given them that calm confidence and that groundedness to be able to move forward. And I think people have been really appreciative too of how they've been treated during this time. I think one of the things you said to me, Mark, was, you've realized that we can be flexible with more confidence and you can be human. And I think the humanity for me is what's been one of the things I love about working with your company and working with you and your leadership team is that humanity piece.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about a couple of examples, right, of some leaders that, maybe in the past they wouldn't have been able to adapt as quickly or as effectively. One is our CFO, Mark Lathan, who, great guy, but he's a typical accounting guy, he's pretty, straight and narrow, he's not, he's a bit of an introvert. He wants to get the job done and things like that. And big changes like that for people like that, they become difficult, maybe more difficult than others. But he was able to accept the changes on how the different accounting groups were working from home with a level of confidence and trust, like going back to what I said of empowering and trusting, to the point where he admits that they've actually improved some processes so that when we're through this, we're going to be bringing back some improved processes back to the workplace, and we know that we can be more flexible. So we as leaders, CEOs, have to start thinking, that if somebody has some things that going on at home, and they feel like they can still work from home, if you've been resistant to that in the past, maybe now we realize that we can do that when necessary, and make people's lives much more complete and free of stress, because they know that they're not going to be told they have to take the day off when they just have to be there because a plumber's showing up, when they can connect online and still do their work, right? So as an example.
Yeah. So Mark, one of the things, obviously one of the pillars of conscious capitalism is conscious leadership, and we've done a lot of work with that. How do you see that some of the leadership development work we've done, like with you, with your team, but with the broader leaders, has also helped you navigate, the current times and where we are right now?
Yeah, well, in particular, you were my leadership coach for myself, and I think it was invaluable to have better self-awareness of who I am, to really just kind of center on some of the areas where maybe where I felt like I needed to improve. And having come into the new position as CEO, I come from pretty humble roots, 2 working class parents. I'm not a blue blood by any means going into becoming a CEO. So I think I was suffering a little bit at first about it. Do I have this imposter syndrome, am I really up for this task and things like that? But realizing that, I do have strengths to bring to the game, and at the same time, just be myself, just being genuine and authentic makes me a lot more successful. And I thank you, Rosie, for helping me see that.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, it's been cool. Actually, I don't even know if you know this, Mark, but Scott and I have also been reaching out to the other members of the senior leadership team. We thought, well, we've reached out to the ambassadors. Why would we not reach out to them just to see how they're doing, to check in, because we coach them. And it's been really cool to hear how a lot of them, that work that they did to overturn that self-limiting narrative is actually serving them very well right now. And they're realizing how ridiculous it was, but because things have been forcefully shifted because of the pandemic and all that's gone on in 2020, it's just solidified that, wow, like, why was I holding on to that? And why was that limiting me? So, so others are experiencing that for whatever that's worth. It's been kind of cool to hear.
Yeah.
So
that is cool.
So, one of the things, because I'm sure that, we get this a lot with some of our other clients, and I know this came up with some of the employee owners as well. You think about the intense effort that obviously Kevin started in 2018 with first the Finding the Why workshops, and then 2019 with the Living the Why. There was a lot of energy just in terms of travel and logistics and time and everything to really get the culture clear and to give everybody that language and to really be intentional about it. And while a lot of people were super appreciative and like, this is great, there was a lot of rumbling of, hey, we're an employee-owned company. Why are you spending my money this way? Why are, there was some pushback. And we decided to educate the ambassadors and the leadership team, at least, about conscious capitalism, because while we were doing this, we weren't using the conscious capitalism language. And so we gave them the framework, and then we shared the firms of endearment research that the publicly traded conscious businesses are outperforming the S&P 500 by a 14-to-1 ratio. So we were trying to give them some of that, but there was still pushback. And so can you talk about how you've addressed some of those comments or questions or concerns that have come from employee owners about why you're quote unquote spending money or wasting money on this type of effort?
Yeah, sure. I think the way I tried to answer it, and I think it was somewhat successful. I mean, you're always going to have a few naysayers. Was that, as senior management, we are used to having different capital requests, right, come across our desk, and usually what you look for is, all right, well, what's the return on investment, right, to whether or not you're going to approve those things. So I tried to really try to give that as an example and saying, well, we're investing in our people by doing this, by developing ourselves as leaders. Please consider that, an essential expenditure that will have ROI, that we're hoping will have ROI. Significant ROI. It'd be interesting, quite frankly, for me to talk to a lot of people now if they're seeing that ROI. I feel we are, as we talked about, to face the times that we're in. So I was trying to tell them I believe it's money well spent. And what better thing to invest in? The most essential part of your business is your people. That's how I tried to do it anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's an investment versus an expense, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have a question that's related to this from Mark Fenner, who is asking how the process of helping employees find their whys and this journey that you've been on the last few years, how has that actually increased engagement or team cohesiveness? Or Mark, how do you know that you're seeing the ROI from this now?
Yeah. Maybe an example of that is that our communications between branches, between the company, has so greater enhanced. I mean, because when you have 27 facilities, there's a lot of coordination between geographies, right? Think about, you're a business where you have inventory of certain products in different locations, but if you're working in a silo, you're going to add cost to the company if you're doubling up inventory that maybe if it's slowly moving here, it might be able to move over there. That's just a business example, right? So now that people knew each other or know each other better, that they could communicate and reach out, and that has helped the business to have that coordination. And again, I can't say it enough, is to have these foundations of communication in place, utilizing the ambassadors a great deal to face this pandemic, to help people feel connected. I think we would have been scrambling and spending a lot of money to figure out ways to do that, and we didn't have to do a lot of that because we had already invested in that.
Great. So then I think that gets us, speaking of ROI, that kind of gets to the last question that I really wanted to talk with you about, Mark. And I know that there's other questions in the Q&A, but I mean, obviously 2020 is a crazy year. A lot of businesses are struggling. Some are just holding on. Like how is 2020 shaping up? Because part of conscious capitalism, right, is that like profit's not a bad thing, but it's the humanity part of it. And so how are you doing right now in 2020? And then what is the outlook for the rest of 2020, and what are you seeing in terms of 2021? Not that anyone can predict it, but kind of what's next for Harcos?
Yeah, I think all of us in our senior leadership roles around the country, around the world, are trying to figure out, where is this going to lead? I think we all realize that there's going to be a rocky road ahead for some time until there is a good vaccine in place that we can get back to some sense of normal. But we're doing okay, to answer your question. We're meeting our numbers. Our sales are down, but the types of products that we're selling that are needed right now tend to have a higher profit margin. So our profitability is pretty much on budget. So, knock on wood, if we can keep doing that, we're doing all right. Some industries are down, particularly when the pandemic hit, people weren't, going out because there were lockdowns. So a lot of the basis for soaps go into things like car washes. So people weren't getting their car washed. So the demand wasn't there. That's one example of a down. But then on the upside, a lot of the materials that are used to make sanitizers. We don't make the sanitizers themselves, but we sell a lot of the raw materials, like the alcohols that are used and the things that make it gel are in very short supply right now. That's why you see a lot of sanitizers now, they're kind of liquidy. That from a chemical industry standpoint, that's a shortage of those thickeners. But anyway, that's just some examples of the ups and downs. But we certainly felt needed and essential, and continue to do so. Yeah. So business is okay, I'd say.
Well, and one of the things I'll just say, one of the things that has struck me as we've, reached out to ambassadors and reached out to leaders over the course of this year is that I just consistently hear is that, wow, when people see so many of their friends and family members that are either being laid off or just not treated well, or they're feeling even more expendable because of what's going on, that people, I think, are feeling that much more appreciative of how cared for they are. And I think that's why we always go back to, there's such an amazing heart in Harcos, which is, and really living that why and living your house. I think it's going to be really interesting to see as whatever the next normal is. I don't like to say come out the other side, because who knows what that looks like, but as things get to be not so much in crisis mode and settle into the next normal, it'll be really interesting, I think, to see next year, if we repeat your culture survey or whatever, like where people are feeling. Because I really think that in many ways, this has strengthened some of the doubters that some people had. And I think it's also enhanced the resolve of people who already believed what was great about Harcos to continue to say, yeah, man, if we can do this in this pandemic, imagine how strong we're going to be on the other side when we don't have these barriers. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah. We have a lot that we've learned from this challenge that we're in, that we can build on. And then, of course, the work that we did working with you, Rosie and Scott, we have some further examples, right, of being our best and living our why.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just put in a shameless plug, since Alexander said, so we do, for those of you who want to know more about the Harcos story, we feature them amongst other of our clients and other organizations that we interviewed in our book, Rehumanizing the Workplace, that Conscious Capitalism Press published. We were super excited to partner with them, and it came out smack dab in the middle of the pandemic in March. So really poor timing, but we go into detail of actually the agenda of what was in each day of those Finding the Why workshops and some of the work we've done and some of the exercises we actually did. So we kind of give away the secret sauce, so to speak, of our core work that we not just did with Harcos, but with others, that really helps create that foundation and that common language to help people show up as conscious leaders, regardless of what their role is.
I appreciate that plug, and really appreciate you two sharing a taste of this for everyone already. There's one question that's coming up from a few people right now related to KPIs, or key performance indicators, as you've gone through this change. Have you found that you've adjusted KPIs either for the company as a whole or for individuals or teams as you've gone through this journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you say KPIs, that could apply to all aspects of the business. It could also apply to leadership development, people's performance reviews and things like that. How do you measure how well you're doing? One of the things that I'm working with HR and the entire company is to incorporate, our how we live our why, the hows, as we call them, and I'll read them real quickly. It's be a team player, lead by example, empower others, show up with a spirit of service, and show compassion. That those elements, no matter what your position is in the company, is a part of your review as a KPI, so that you can have that discussion with your manager about, how you're doing in that. Where do you need help, or where do you need to possibly improve in those areas? Because as Rosie said, and I subscribe to, if we're hitting this on all those five cylinders, so to speak, we're really humming along very well, no matter what your position is, because you're going to be a lot more effective as a communicator. And the other traditional KPIs of profitability and things like that, will improve. So I hope that answers the question, but that's how I see tying this work in as part of a KPI process.
Thank
Are there
you.
other questions, Alexander, that we can
So we
answer
have
in our
many
final
questions
minutes?
here. I don't know if we're going to get to all of them, but you just mentioned, Mark, that you've learned some things even through this pandemic that you're going to build on. Is there anything that you haven't shared yet that is a key takeaway that would be valuable to share with everyone else listening?
Safety. We always, as a chemical company, have to be focused on safety, but boy, we have had to be agile in our safety protocols because, operating in 19 states, we actually, I'm not trying to be political here, but we haven't had centralized, leadership per se on protocols. So those 19 states had, different nuances of compliance, and they continue to. And how important that is that we communicate and stay on top of and communicate those things. So I guess what we're going to build on is how we've been able to manage that and stay agile and get out the communications again about when the changes occur. As an example, in the state of Kansas for a while there, where we operate our corporate headquarters, there was a list of states that if you had traveled to and you come back, you had to immediately 14-day quarantine. And every state had different iterations of that, right? So managing that. Now, as an essential worker, a truck driver gets exempt from that. He can go through those states if he's on his mission of doing his essential work. But for the most part, if somebody took a vacation in Florida, and that's on the, self-quarantine list, we had to make sure people understood that, hey, you can't vacation in Florida because we're expecting you to get back to work when you, when you get back. So that sort of thing. I hope that answers the question.
I really appreciate that emphasis on being agile through this. That's so important right now and so important to continue afterward. We have another question from one of our attendees who's asking if there's one particular change over the last 3 years without which it would not have been successful, either to change to an ESOP or to be as prepared as you were right now. And I'm curious to hear from either of you, is there one thing that without that, this would not have been possible?
Boy, one thing. We've touched on the communication piece, and the pillars of that, communication for us are the ambassadors. So the work that we did to really have those ambassadors evolve into what they are today and continue to be. Now they're actively working on projects to help the company, whether it be communication and recognition, which is a piece that I struggle with. I forget sometimes to tell people they did a good job. And the process improvement and best practices. Yeah, we have that in place, like I said. So that I would again hate to have gone through this without that.
Yeah, I was going to echo that. I mean, just as the outside partner working with all of you, I think it actually started with the ambassadors, and I feel like that's been the glue or the hub. Not that all the other work hasn't been important, but they are the reinforcer of the why, and the reinforcer. They are that two-way conduit voice of their fellow employee owners. They're what energizes and kind of reminds people and re-anchors them back to it. Also, even more so even than some of the people leaders. Some of them are people leaders too, but yeah, I would say that ambassador network is, I think, has been so critical for your success and being able to get through this and be where you are versus even 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, and they give some tough feedback sometimes, which I need to hear.
Yeah.
Keep me honest, keep me on track, and I really greatly appreciate that.
Thank you. We actually have time for just one more question, so this is going to have to be the last one. But it was one of the earliest questions that we actually received, and it's what are the characteristics of conscious employees that you've either been looking for or have seen through this transition? Not just the culture ambassadors, but from employees across the board in the company.
I'll let Rosie answer this too, but from what I see is people that have the ability to focus on situations rather than individuals, especially during the hard times. To look for solutions and to stay positive are those that are being the most conscious. And it kind of ties into that above the line, below the line, type of thing.
Yeah.
That to me shows me a conscious employee.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that I go back to the mindset of it's the conscious employee is really the employee that is choosing to show up as a leader. And in this case, because of Harcos's structure, choosing to show up as an owner. Meaning that if I see something that isn't working, I'm not going to either sit back and blame, judge, deflect. I'm going to look at how can I be part of the solution, right? I'm going to be mindful of company resources. I'm going to go, hey, you know what? I'm going to own my own stuff, right? If I showed up below the line or not a good version of myself, I'm going to clean up messes. And so I think that it's that mindset of I'm not going to just sit back and wait for someone else, quote unquote, more qualified or whose job it is, that I'm going to pitch in. And we have such incredible stories of people doing things way out. I mean, not unsafely, but doing stuff that's not even their job description because it's in the interest of serving one of their fellow employee owners, serving the community, serving the customer. And that's the essence of, I think, what makes Harcos really strong. And so what I love and what I'm so encouraged is that as now you hire more employee owners, because you have that owner's manual that's part of the onboarding process, they're getting it from the get-go. If this is who we are, and kind of like, hey, if you don't want to be part of a company that actually wants you to step up and show up as an owner, this probably isn't going to be the place for you.
Yeah. And add real quickly too, if you don't mind, I think that establishing the impact award process or the impact suggestion process has given another vehicle. And I briefly could explain what that is that any employee in the company, if they have an idea that they want to put forward to the senior leadership, they just send an email to impact@harcos.com, basically as an internal email. And it goes immediately distributes to the senior leadership team for review. And then throughout the year, any year, we now have a process whereby somebody can be nominated for an impact award for doing something over and above that really had a great positive impact on the company. So that gives another vehicle for people to be conscious leaders within Harcos.
That is absolutely amazing. Your story, the work that you two have done together is so inspiring. I just want to say thank you so much, not only for speaking with us and sharing all this with the Conscious Capitalism community to learn from, but for undertaking this journey yourselves and being just such incredible models of conscious capitalism. Rosie and Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. For anyone who's still listening, if you're interested in reading more about the story and others that Rosie said, her book, Rehumanizing the Workplace, is available on Conscious Capitalism's website, consciouscapitalism.org. Go there. We would love for you to be able to learn more, and we'd love for you to come back to next week's webinar with Joe Kenner and Marcus Glover from Grayston Bakery, talking about the incredible work that they're doing with new hiring practices and new ways to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion going forward in the world today. With that, Mark and Rosie, once again, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.